recovery is the antidote to stress. That's actually how we kind of ebb in and ebb out and manage it.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and this is Well, Hello Anxiety. In a world that often moves too fast, we're here to pause, breathe, and understand anxiety together. Each episode will explore practical strategies, share honest conversations, and uncover the science behind anxiety and well-being, all while creating a space where it's okay to not be okay. Let's continue this journey together. We all know the well-being basics: eat better, move more, sleep more, stress less. So why are so many of us more exhausted than ever? Well, today's guest says it's because well-being has become another thing to optimise, another impossible standard, and I tend to agree. So Jessica Spendlove is here to offer a different way forward. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you, Jess. You are joining us here from Sydney. I'm, of course, in Melbourne. Jessica is a performance dietitian, a speaker, and executive coach. She has a new book. Congratulations, by the way. It's always an enormous undertaking to publish a book. Her book is called For the Long Run, and Jess actually sets out 5 rhythms to help us build sustainable energy and resilience. And it's not about adding more to your to-do list, because I think our to-do lists are long enough. So, Jessica, a very warm welcome to the podcast.
Jodi, thank you so much for having me and for that lovely intro.
Absolute pleasure. I love talking well-being. It's one of my favourite things. And I know that with the work that you do, that you're really keen for people to kind of know, like, it's just not something extra to add onto the plate, and it's about building something that's sustainable. But let's maybe start with the fact that, you know, everyone just does seem so exhausted, and even a good night's sleep doesn't seem to be enough to kind of like get that replenishment and that recovery which we need for our well-being. So what are you finding people are saying? What's going on with this exhaustion?
You're exactly right. People are running on empty. They feel like they're doing everything right. They know the things. And my question would be, are you doing them and how consistently? And also, are you really operating in a way that fits your life? Or you are listening to the protocols and the ice baths and the red light therapies and the supplements, which, don't get me wrong, there's a place for those for the right person at the right time, once the foundations are consistently in place. But when every day is different, you know, when we're working in the office, working at home, that's causing chaos to our routine, I would simply ask people to reflect on, what do your days look like? And even though they are likely very different every single day, do you have a level of consistency around some of these anchors? Like what time you eat, what time you have a break, what time you exercise, what time you go to bed. And this isn't about becoming a robot, but it's understanding that energy is an output. And for you to have consistent or more consistent energy, it requires consistent inputs, which are these 5 rhythms of nutrition, exercise, stress and recovery, sleep, and very importantly, also connection.
Yes. I remember Dr. Christopher Peterson, who was one of the founding fathers of positive psychology, when he was asked to distill positive psychology down into a soundbite, he said, "How many words have I got?" And they said, "Maybe 3. He said, "I'll use 2. And he said, "Other people." And it's very telling. It's very telling, our connections. We are wired to connect. I want to come back. So you were talking about consistency, because I know that when it comes to sleep, the measure has always been for most, how many hours did I get? So what else can you tell us about sleep and the importance of the consistency of sleep?
Yeah, look, the hours are important. You know, there's a level of importance. But what we now know is that what is more important is the time you go to bed and the time that you wake up, and how consistent they are across the week, and ideally on the weekend as well. And I say this as a mum of an 18-month-old, so I come at this from a sleep-deprived lens myself. But it really is understanding that sleep, yes, it's recovery, and there are other aspects of recovery which I'm sure we'll get into, but it's not just recovery. It is how we clear out our brain. It is the master clock for so many physiological and metabolic and hormonal triggers. And, when that is consistent, these things operate in more rhythm. So that's why you can even be getting the hours, but still feel wired and tired. Or if, that 7, 8, 9 hours just feels impossible for the life phase that you're at, what can you control? And if you can bring the time that you go to bed and wake up within a more narrow window, if it's totally chaotic, bring it into an hour and then try and bring it within 30 minutes. And the other thing I'll say, which we love to do when it comes to health and well-being, is overhaul. Completely change what we're doing, and it's completely unsustainable. And so if the sleep piece sounds like an opportunity for you, I would encourage you to start making shifts by about 15 minutes. Whether it's the time you go to bed, bring that forward 15 minutes or try to standardize it a little bit more and edge it towards where you want it to be.
Congratulations, by the way, on being a mum to an 18-month-old. It's a really exciting time of life. But like you say, it's a stage of life where your control over your sleep patterns is not your own necessarily. And lots of people listening will find the same thing, that depending on life stages and what's happening, exactly as you said, and it's not about making major changes. It's about finding that change that you can make. And as you also said earlier, it's about being consistent. So you talk about the 5 rhythms. Can you tell us more?
So the consistency thing I want to kind of double tap on a little bit, because it's just bringing awareness to what are you doing? And, what I see in a lot of people, particularly at the front end of the day, is it's totally dictated by what their day looks like. If they're in the office, if they're at home, if they're traveling, if they're dropping the children to school, all these variables. And then so, maybe their nutrition or their exercise, if we start there, that depends on those variables rather than going, okay, what is realistic for me? And let's use the nutrition, because you may not get to exercise in the morning every day, but most people will eat at some point, whether they're fasting, whatever that first meal is. And so what I would encourage you to do is just to think about that first meal for yourself. And regardless of where you are and what you're doing, how can you have that within about a 30-minute window? Because what I find a lot of people, when I start to dig a bit deeper, some mornings it's at 7, other mornings it's at 8, other day it scraps off their children's plate, or they've skipped it. And when all of this is happening at the front end of the day, of course that's going to show up as inconsistent energy at the back end of the day, or cravings, or we back end our eating, which then impacts our sleep, and then we're on this downward kind of spiral. The thing I'll say is I've strategically used the word rhythm. Like I could have said pillars or areas, but I like the word rhythm because it's not about rigidity and routine. It's about what is your rhythm. And that's, I guess, the conversation I invite for people to reflect on and look at the opportunities to upgrade, not overhaul. And so, exercise. So for me, I've always I'm a morning person. I used to milli exercise in the morning when I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. And now it's all the logistics with my partner and schedules and whatnot. And I really found I was in analysis paralysis. It was like if I couldn't exercise here, then I just couldn't make it happen. And so this work and this book is, what I teach and preach and speak and coach and write on, but it's things that I've navigated at different points. And so the idea of, well, what is my exercise rhythm? I exercise to feel good, to boost my mood, so I'm not snapping at everyone, so I don't have the road rage when I'm driving through Sydney and it's chaotic. That's the why. And so that just shifted, and it's like also the removal of the perfect conditions, which a lot of people have. I want to do the 45-minute run, the 45-minute walk, the 45-minute class. Well, if you've only got 10 or 15 or 20, something is better than nothing. And the thing with the 5 rhythms is they all intersect. And yes, by background, I am a performance dietitian, but my work in recent years has expanded to what I now call sustainable high performance, which is really how do you do whatever you want to do in life, sustain that, but have that as well-being as that foundation. And that's why it's expanded into nutrition and sleep and exercise and stress and recovery, which I would really like to dive into because that's what I see as the biggest opportunity for a lot of people. And then the connection piece.
I do want to come back to that. I have one question based on what you said at the start of your last answer, which was around trying to eat within 30 minutes of waking. And we'll put fasting aside because some people will be intermittently fasting or time-restricted eating. But can you just speak to the person listening who's like, I delay my breakfast. I'll start with a coffee because I want to kind of like push the calories out if there's that thinking around health and wellbeing and body composition and that delay. Can you please give the listeners a good reason to start getting something on board within that 30 minutes of waking?
Yeah, so I should clarify what I meant by the 30 minutes. Well, there's two things there. One is it's within 30 minutes of your time that you would start your day. So whatever time you would have breakfast. So I guess I gave the example of 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. Like it's for you to reflect and go, what's realistic? You know, what's that 30-minute window that will work for me most days, and aim to have that in there. But you do bring up a very important point, which is for women, and particularly women in midlife, there is benefit to having that first meal or snack if they go to the gym within that 30 minutes to help with their system, their physiology, their brain, the energy at the gym if they're going. So, yeah, important to clarify, but both of those are kind of correct depending on the person.
Yes. I obviously misunderstood at the beginning, but there was two parts to that answer, which I think is really important. And like you say, it's about that rhythm. And the other example that we've already talked about is sleep. Trying to, where possible, go to sleep at about the same time, wake up at about the same time, even on the weekends. I am a midlife woman and I wear a Whoop, so I track my sleep consistency and my data. And the difference it makes to my recovery is extraordinary. And because I get the information, it's more top of mind for me to be able to make some changes that are beneficial. But let's move on because I too am really interested to talk about stress and to talk about recovery. And it's a conversation I've been having with a few guests lately from sort of their different kind of specialty areas. What's one thing that you would just love for people to know about stress and recovery that you don't think is common knowledge?
Well, I think the main thing is that not all stress is bad, and the advice of we just need to remove stress actually doesn't serve us. We actually need to do hard things to build our stress tolerance. And so in the book, the idea is like attaching the habits in the rhythms to the outcome. And I think that's the missing piece. I think people are trying to do all the things. You know, the knowledge isn't the issue, it's the execution. And I'm hoping to bridge that gap. And I think a key part of that is going, why do I do this thing? And it's not about more habits or things on the to-do list. It's like, what's the bare minimum that I can do on my busiest days, not just my best? But an important part of that is going, what helps me charge up and give me energy? What helps me charge down and recover? But what helps me expand my capacity, which is expand my stress tolerance. And the big thing about stress is, so exercise, and this is where the saunas and the cold plunges and doing hard things, setting tasks, actually, you know, it's kind of that saying like, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And it's exposing ourselves to these hard things, which in mega doses would be dangerous for us, but in small doses build this capacity element. And I think importantly to also say is that recovery is the antidote to stress. That's actually how we kind of ebb in and ebb out and manage it. And this is what the elite athletes and the military know, and this is the work I've done there. And this is really one of the key messages I want to bring to everybody. I think in the business world, whether you're in corporate, doing your own thing, I think a lot of people think recovery is lazy, recovery is the reward for hard work. You know, I'll get to that when. But in these other environments, they know that recovery isn't the reward for hard work. Recovery is the work. That's actually how they manage to push their bodies and their brains and all of that. And something you said about the Whoop, I have a Whoop on as well, and I've used an Aura before. And I really believe in having your own daily dashboard, which is made up of two things: subjectively how you feel, because that's always available to you, your energy, your appetite, your performance cognitively and physically. But we're so busy, like we've got access to these wearables, which, I think they're pretty accessible for most, and they just help us have access to what's going on under the hood with our physiology. And in particular, stress, because stress isn't just, I've done a hard session at the gym. It's cognitively, what am I carrying? I've got to do a presentation. I've got a big project. And so when you can see how your body is responding, both improving and what's stressing you, then you can really kind of anchor in behaviors. But yeah, the recovery being the antidote to stress and not all stress being bad would be the two big things there.
Yes, it's so interesting because I am on the back end of a virus of some sort. I didn't test. It could have been COVID. It could have been just a bad cold. I don't know. But I was in yellow recovery. My heart rate variability was really low and my resting heart rate was higher. And I could see the stress on my body whilst I was unwell. And I could see also those measures improving over time. And there's been a bit of external sort of stress in my life in the last week or so as well. And on Sunday, I'd just been in the yellow and I wanted to get it back into the green. So on Sunday, I just sort of thought, I just want today to be a really good recovery day. And I took myself off for a walk with the dog in the morning. And then my dad had been in hospital, hence the reason there'd been additional stresses. And before going to the hospital, I thought, I'm just going to go and have a little wander around the shops. I wanted to get some more steps in. It wasn't a nice day. So I thought I'll just have a wander around inside, get some more steps, just leisurely by myself, no one else to talk to. And I read my book in the afternoon for about 15 minutes and we have a sauna. So we'd had a sauna that day. I ate well, I had plenty of water, and lo and behold, the next day my recovery was in green. And, there's something to be said about kind of being able to see the outcomes of your efforts. And not everybody has a wearable that tracks how your physiology is tracking, but it's really motivating for me. If people are in two minds about, perhaps this is not what we plan to talk about, but people are in two minds about whether or not they might need something like that, what would you sort of say are some of the pros and the cons, if there are any?
I think that, we're in an interesting time in this whole optimization, which I think is part of the issue as well. People thinking, we need to do all these things. So for me, you got to know yourself. And what I often find, and when I'm coaching someone, like, yes, you can have that support and accountability to help navigate. But I think if you can see it as a tool, and if you can see it, for me, the biggest advantage, like, yes, in the moment, it's helpful to see if something's brewing or, you've taken the recovery day to try and manage the extra stress and you've responded well. I think that's good. But where I think the real benefit is are the trends over time, because that then it gets to know you and then it can pick up on things early. And for me, that's why I'm more pro them. Look, I think if you've got a background with an eating disorder or any kind of obsessive like health behavior, and you're working with someone on that, I think definitely consider it, because sometimes tracking can, flare up some sort of behaviors. So this is where you really need to know yourself. But I do think there's a bit of breaking down barriers on how they can actually be used and how they can be helpful. And the other thing, you don't have to use them for forever. I have some clients, we use them for a period of time so they can start to get to know themselves better, those subjective measures better, and that's enough. And then other people, personally, I'm similar to yourself. I like to use it. It just helps me keep a view on what's happening. But I can also go days without checking it. And that's the nice thing. It's not pings and dings and notifications everywhere. You actually have to go and look at it specifically if you've got everything turned off. So yeah, I think there are a lot of pros. There's a few cons, and you really need to just see if it feels right for you, but know yourself.
Yes. And what you said earlier too is being able to tune in, knowing yourself, checking in. How am I feeling? What do I need? It's being able to use the interoception, and interoception being the awareness of what's happening in our body. Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? What do I need? What's best for me? And that's, like you say, that's accessible to us if we take the time to stop and reflect, which not everyone does, because sometimes it's go, go, go. One of the things I'm curious about your thoughts on are myths around well-being that you've seen perpetuated, or that you've seen trip people up. Are there any that come to mind when we talk about myths?
Probably the one that comes to mind, and it's maybe not a myth, but it's just an invitation to be curious, is around the fasting and whether we think, that's something supportive for us, whatever the decision has been. I find when I get curious with people, it's often around, some people say it's the cognitive component in the morning, but a lot of people say it's more a body composition, weight management tool. But the thing that I often see in this regard is people implement and then they just forget to kind of assess, how is this actually working for me? And so what I invite people to do in that context is what I would call A/B test. And you may have your days where you're doing that, but maybe if you're hearing me talk about, the morning and anchoring your morning and standardizing that, and you might be thinking, I actually miss breakfast. Maybe add that back in and then compare the pair, either go between the two or do one for a week and the other for the week. But don't just zoom in on the morning. Zoom out on the entire day. Zoom out on your entire week. How is my energy across my day and week? How is my focus? Am I snacking? Do I have more cravings? Because what I find a lot of people do, and I'm using the fasting as an example because that's what came to mind, is we get really narrow and we think about that short term, that moment in time in the day. But we really need to zoom out and think, how is this serving us and supporting us? And I think for me the concern with the fasting is it often is just a way of adjusting behavior, which doesn't actually change behavior to improve health or performance or longevity. It just kind of manages lifestyle. And then if we're not really assessing how that's showing up for us, body composition's an example, muscle mass in particular as well. If that's declining, we're not actually potentially supporting what we're trying to do. So I just ask people to really not think with their health, try the thing, do the thing, stick with the thing, to really use that lens of, I want to experiment and I really want to assess if this is sustainable and giving me true success, and to think about all of the things that matter, which I would argue the most important things are how you show up every single day, what your energy is like, what your focus is like, how you're moving through the day, because that will actually get you the outcome that you're probably chasing anyway.
Yes. I fell victim to that, Jess, because I'd fasted on and off. I'd fasted probably 2 days a week, and that's on 500 calories 2 days a week for years. My husband and I had both done it. And then as I got older, I'm 52 now, as I started to approach that perimenopause phase, and I'm a CrossFitter, and so I would sometimes be I would try not to CrossFit, to train on a fast day, but occasionally I would, or I would time restrict and I wouldn't eat before I was training. And then what I actually realized was that I was undercutting my training efforts. I was really fatigued a lot of the time, and it was no longer serving me. I had a moment of reflection and realized, hang on a second, this is not working for me anymore. I also educated myself further on what I needed, and I saw a dietitian, and so I was able to, and so stages of life can certainly change what's going to be good for us too, can't they?
Definitely. I talk about seasons, and what a lot of people do, myself included, we benchmark against a different version of ourselves, and our best in a different version of life becomes our baseline minimum. And this is why people feel like, not doing the things, and we're chasing this version of ourselves, which actually isn't the current version. And so, I do repeat it a lot in the book, and I know I've already said it here, but the book is about saying, what can I do on my busiest days, not just my best? And when that becomes what we're aiming for, We get that done. We move, we feel in a completely different space. And then if we've got the capacity, sure, we can scale that up. But don't aim for your best day in a different season of life as your baseline minimum for now when you're just setting yourself up for the impossible.
Oh, this conversation is a conversation that will get listeners to pause and reflect on kind of what they're doing and what they might be hoping to achieve and whether or not what they're doing is going to meet those goals and what changes might need to be made. And as you said, if you can do it on your busiest day, because, like life is lived in the everyday. I've shared this quote so many times, the Annie Dillard quote that how we spend our days is how we spend our lives. And if we go about waiting for the perfect day to get things done that we know are good for us and that make us feel good and give us our energy and our attention and help us with our health and our longevity as well, whatever it is that we're working towards, we need to find that rhythm that is sustainable, which is what you have written about. And I wonder for the person that's listening that thinks like this is a bit of a wake-up call, and I realise that there are things that I could be doing. I do have very full days. It's a very full season of life. Could you make a few suggestions for people to kind of think about? Obviously, we've talked about sleep and we've talked about food, but just for the person that says, like, I want to start somewhere, I want pretty good bang for my buck, what might be a couple of things I could consider to try to make a part of my busy days, knowing that when the ebb and flow of life and seasons and time and work and children change, that there's more space to do more?
Yeah, one of the biggest ones, and it's in the recovery. So there's a stress and recovery rhythm chapter. And with recovery, I explain what it is and how people can look to build recovery into their days, their weeks, their seasons and their years. And where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck is what you do every day. But this isn't, taking half an hour leisurely walk. I mean, if you can take a half an hour leisurely walk, please do that. Like movement, exercise, sunlight, nature, tick, tick, tick. But what I'm talking about is the back to back to back, whether that's meeting to meeting, whether that's dropping the children off, going to work, back to pick them up, whatever that is, back to back to back, I'm inviting you to have some intentional stimulant-free time. And that can be as little as 1 to 2 minutes, but it's about you being intentional, which means not picking up the phone and scrolling social media, doing some breath work, 4 in, 6 out, or some box breathing, preferably where the exhale is longer. There's so many amazing meditation apps and different, recordings, but you can just literally sit here in between us talking and I'm going 4 in, 6 out just to kind of regulate myself a little bit. If you've got a little bit longer, go for the lap around the block, have a herbal tea, but it's just about taking time away from screens, caffeine, and also sugar or crappy carbs. So, they're the things we tend to reach for when we have a break. And this is not an anti-coffee thing. I love coffee. But even that, like what I would say is most people are probably having a mid-morning coffee. If you can walk to your, walk around the block before you go to the coffee shop, leave your phone in your pocket or at your desk if you don't need to use it to pay. And so you're honestly doing the same thing. You're just being a little bit more intentional because these micro moments, they help you down-regulate, downshift. They help you reflect and relax. And when you're wired and tired and not getting to bed or waking at 3 a.m. with all the thoughts, that's because you haven't allowed for that to happen in the day. And the other one, it's kind of on the sleep front, but I would encourage you to set a go-to-bed alarm. That can be the circuit breaker. But to think about going to bed like a plane landing. And, I'm sure if anyone has been on more than a few flights, they would know, you would pretty much know. Put your tray tables up, put your windows up, put your phones away. Like it's a very methodical process. That's what we want our brain to go, oh, okay, when I do these 2 or 3 things in succession, I'm getting ready to go to bed. That's you getting ready to land at night. And so that cue helps you as well. So there's a couple which I think really high return on investment.
Yes, a bedtime alarm is a really good idea because it's easy for the night to get away, especially if you have had a big day. And, the streaming services are set up to, they don't tell you the time, that next episode will play. If you're watching something like YouTube, there's the dopamine kind of driver to keep moving and keep watching. And it's hard. There are no stopping kind of references like there. When I grew up and we had, a weekly show that would start at 7, finish at 8, and you'd have to wait a week to watch it. We don't get the stopping cues often in our time when we might be watching a show or relaxing on the couch at night. So having an alarm, having something to sort of say, hey, it's time to maybe start winding down, and keeping the lights dim and having a routine, like you say, so you start to train your brain and your body. What you said about the 3 a.m. kind of wide awake kind of worry time or focused on work, thinking about work, are there any suggestions for those who wake regularly in the night and struggle to get back to sleep?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of things going on there. So there's a few. One is to have a good night's sleep. It really does start in the morning, and that's why I often like to try to help people to front load their day. One of the chapters is on the biological rhythms that we can leverage, which, our circadian rhythm, which is your 24-hour body clock. Literally everything about today's society is working against how our circadian rhythm is working. And so even if you can start your morning facing the sunlight versus facing your phone, that even is a little shift to help, this back end of the day. But the 3 a.m. is interesting. If you've got a lot of thoughts going on, first of all, if you can start to get them out, have a note pad next to you and get them out at night. But then if you can move that to before you go to bed, because you might think, I don't have things on my mind, but at 2 or 3 a.m., you've got things on your mind. So if you can, shift that behavior into that landing protocol. But the other thing is if you can just have a couple of really basic and boring thoughts you can think through, shuffle through some thoughts of your favorite recipe and, the steps to make that, or, a cognitive shuffle of you can name a word and then you work through each letter in that word, say apple, and you work through a word association with the A and then the double P and, et cetera. And the other one I've heard from a very kind of senior, C-suite type person is she started to allocate a 15-minute window at the front of her day the next morning. And so when she woke up thinking about all the things, she also knew, I've got time to deal with that in the morning when my cortisol's high. And even just that pattern recognition of knowing, yep, it's all good, we're going to deal with that then, as well as kind of the brain dump before, that really helps. So there's definitely a couple of things, but oh my goodness, there's nothing worse.
Oh goodness, it is. Yeah, it is hard. And when I find this, and this happened to me last night actually, I was thinking about my dad and some of the things that were worrying me and about a couple of work things. And what I find is, when I go to gratitude, that for me is something that helps me to settle back down. So that's something that is part of my kind of toolkit.
I love that.
But yeah, it's but what you said so true. It's about when we can. I was almost going to say if you know you've got a time that you are going to be able to address, as the example that you just shared, address what it is that's coming up from you. And it's almost like permission to park it, isn't it? It's like putting it on a mental Post-it note. I know I'm going to come back to it, so the brain can kind of let go of it in that moment. But you mentioned cortisol. I'd love for you to just share a little bit with our listeners about the cortisol rhythm, because a lot of people listening will hear cortisol and think it's a stress hormone. Too much cortisol is not good. What would you share about cortisol that most people might not necessarily know and understand about it?
Yeah, I think cortisol gets a bit of a bad rap. It needs a bit of a PR makeover. It's a really important hormone. It helps us get up and go, and we don't want our cortisol to be flatlined or stable. We do want it to peak in the morning. That is how we start to rise and get up and get going with our day. But we want to have behaviors that help that peak in the morning and then help it dip and wean in the afternoon and evening. And there are quite a few things that morning sunlight, the circadian rhythm is part of it. the, 10 to 15 minutes in the morning. And so if you, like, I have, it's a little bit of a tangent, but one question I use in my keynotes, and it's in the book, is what is your domino habit? And I invite people to think, what is that first thing that you do in the morning that sets the tone for the rest of your day? And it's unique to everybody. And if you can find it and protect it, then that helps that, I've anchored in something that helps the rest of the day run a little bit more effortlessly. But say for you, maybe that domino habit is, some sort of time outdoors, potentially walking to get a coffee or walking your dog. Or for me, it's walking, with my 18-month-old to go to the coffee shop. Like, it's a bit of this ritual. If you can have some sort of sunlight exposure in the morning as part of your routine, potentially part of that domino habit, that really does help mimic that cortisol rhythm that we want. It's just essentially when we're stressed, our cortisol is out, it's spiking in the afternoon or the evening, and it's not dipping down. That's when we can really feel wired but tired. And so, the movement, the sunlight, the nutrition, the hydration, like, these are all these fundamental habits which anchoring them more evenly across the day rather than racing through the morning, being very reactive and playing catch-ups and back-ending probably everything, hydration, meals, etc., then that disrupts that as well, and it inhibits the sleep. So, don't fear it. Just learn to kind of lean into it, and it's something to understand, definitely.
Yes, and time outside it's
nature.
Quite shocking how little time we as a population spend outside now to even 10 years ago. And yes, I think, the ideas that you've just shared and the ones that we've been talking about throughout the whole conversation are like about finding your rhythm throughout the day, but setting yourself up for success. And like a good night's sleep sort of begins with the morning, and, a morning that kind of sets you up for success in terms of your health, your mental health, your well-being, your sleep. It takes a little bit of planning time can be really helpful, can't it? A little bit of time to sort of reflect on where you're at, reflect on what it is that you would like, and to think about it. We can't be reactive, or we'll never set ourselves up in the ways that we, will benefit from. I know you, in your work, Jess, you are coaching and you are speaking. You've obviously written your book. What would be a final sort of parting message? Is there something I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with our listeners, or a key kind of idea that you'd like listeners to sort of head away from the podcast thinking about?
Yeah, something you've just said. I talk a lot about being proactive and not reactive, and most of us via default are living reactively. We let our day run us, our meetings run us, our commitments run us, and then we fit our appointments with ourselves, like our meals, our exercise, our brain breaks, our sleep, that just fits in when it can. And, if you can start to be a little bit more proactive, not only will that bring you back to baseline, because when we live reactively, we're kind of topping up. We get exhausted, we top up. We get tired, we top up. We get hungry, we top up. But when we're a little bit more proactive, that doesn't just get us to that baseline, it elevates us. And that's when it starts to feel like, oh, I've got a bit more energy, I've got a bit more capacity, I can start to add a few more things in. And so I would invite people to think, where could I be more proactive? Some of the things I've spoken about, the go to bed alarm, the first meal of your day within a 30-minute window, having lunch within a 30 to 60-minute window away from your desk. How can you be more proactive in your days? Set the conditions for what you need, and you will start to feel like a completely different person quite soon. And what I'm talking about, like, don't get me wrong, there's things we can change and elevate, but a lot of what I'm talking about here is probably what you're already doing, but just starting to be a little bit more proactive, a bit more rhythm for yourself, and creating, I haven't even said this phrase, but structured flexibility, which is kind of what I'm talking about with consistency. Like, it's not rigid, robotic, same meal, same thing. It's just 4 walls around your day to create the conditions that you need to have a bit more energy, to have a bit more space, to recover a little bit more. So, the book it's been great to kind of bring all the lessons and learnings into one place and get clear on the message and what I want to share with hopefully a lot of people. And so it's exciting that it's going to be out very soon, in about a week.
Oh, that's so exciting, which means by the time that this is published, your book will be out in the world, which is very exciting. Can you tell listeners a bit more about where they can contact you, connect with you, the name of the book, and where they can find it for sale?
Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn and Instagram. So Jessica Spendlove, my website, jessicaspendlove.com. The book is called For the Long Run, Build Your Daily Operating System for Energy, Recovery and Wellbeing. And I really see it as, your guide to feeling better today, but also sustaining your health and performance for decades to come.
Absolutely brilliant. Who published it, Jess?
It's with Wiley.
Amazing. Oh, yeah. Congratulations. And thank you for sharing some of your time with us and for writing the book. It's a huge undertaking. It's very exciting. So enjoy launch day. And thank you again for sharing your wisdom with us here today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you for sharing this time with me on Well, Hello Anxiety. Remember, understanding anxiety is the first step to managing it. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. Take things one moment at a time. Focus on what you can control and know that you are not alone on this journey. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with someone who might need to hear it too. I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and I'll meet you right back here next week.